Hey everybody, what's going on? I know it's been a while, but I definitely had to come back and make a video giving my thoughts on the Acolyte show. Unfortunately, it's another controversial show that's not loved by many. The focus of Star Wars content continues to shift from the nerdy lore and awesome elements that make the franchise what it is, to nowadays creators and newer Star Wars fans caring about things that just shouldn't really matter as much in Star Wars. I fear Star Wars will never go back to what it once was, and the battle within the fandom will be never ending. I truly think the Acolyte could have been a decent show. There are some things I probably would never agree with, but this is yet another Star Wars show that is a missed opportunity because of baffling decisions by those in charge. So here's my thoughts on the Acolyte. You know, I was originally excited for this show. I remember when it was first announced a few years back, Disney talked about how they were going to make a show that focused on the dark side of the Force. Everyone was pumped that they were finally going to do a show that revolved around the bad guys, you know, the Sith or some kind of dark side users. Then fast forward to when the trailers and promos started coming out. We got a little taste of the story and the hype that was brewing. The show is teased to us almost like a murder mystery series. There's an assassin out there killing Jedi, and then we're going to see the Jedi who are in their prime at this point in the timeline launch an investigation and hunt down this assassin. I thought that was cool, and I became even more excited. And look, I was always cautiously optimistic because Leslie Headland was always a question mark with this series, because honestly, I wasn't a fan of her last year calling George Lucas misogynistic, and I don't agree with many of her thoughts and interpretations on Star Wars, but hey, she does seem to have a passion for the franchise, so I will give her that. But going back to what we first knew about the show, I had a significant amount of hype because I was cool with what the show was going to do with this murder mystery thing. I was so ready to see a conflict between the Jedi and dark side users during the High Republic era. I was hoping to get a show that featured some of the coolest elements in Star Wars that make Star Wars what it is. And those things included the Force, lightsabers, the Jedi, the Sith, and really everything that encompasses being on either side of the Force. Also, having all of this in this time period that hasn't been explored much on the television screen, just a great opportunity. I've always wanted to see more stories from the comics and novels brought to live action or even animation. The show hit the ground running, in my opinion, as we are instantly thrown into watching the Jedi killer in action, and the hype builds once the Jedi begin their investigation. And then we get into the twins, May and Osha. Their story is the main catalyst to the plot of the show. Unfortunately, the story about the twins was subpar, in my opinion. It should have been emotional, it should have been compelling, and for a few moments here and there it was, but the writing was bad, the dialogue was laughable at times, and many storytelling decisions had me scratching my head. Characters seemed to change their mind a lot throughout the show, and these weren't plot twists that leave you in awe, these are just sudden changes that are jarring. They are confusing, contradictory, and just flat out dumb. I don't know why the show struggled to answer its own plot. I can't fully invest myself emotionally into the tragedy between the Jedi and the witches on Brendok because honestly, it was nothing more than a misunderstanding that, again, was created because of this weird writing. The Jedi thought the witches were bad instantly, out of nowhere, and they were conflicted on whether or not to save the kids. Sol randomly becomes super attached to Osha even though he hardly knows her or much about the group of witches. Then they start throwing things around, other terminology like the thread that is apparently different from the Force that was able to create these twins, and then you have the virgins, and that's referred to multiple times, but I don't know, the stuff never really was explained in much detail in a way that I would understand and comprehend. And, you know, talking about other things like Sol killing the mother in self-defense, in my opinion, I know that it was a bad thing to kill her, that was a big mistake, but like, was it a mistake? You could argue that he was defending himself because the mother, yes, she was transforming herself into some kind of like ghost thing to transport herself to save her daughter, but when she does that and looks like a monster in front of Sol, what do you expect him to do? Also, you know, like when May starts that fire and she's standing there with a shocked expression like, oh, did I do that? And then it is a little bit weird and controversial and contradictory that she blames the Jedi for everything that happened when she herself started the fire, which eventually led to the demise of her mother. Not that she can't hold a grudge with Sol for killing her mother because she saw that, but again, when you're writing this, I just have a hard time being sold on the way everything was written in the flashback episodes, you know, which really was the primer for this story. And ultimately, throughout the entire series, character decisions and other major plot points just feel rushed, and here I am again after another show asking why we continue to make 8-episode seasons and episodes that only last 40 minutes. This is the one defensive stance I will continue to take for the content that I don't like in this franchise, because I truly think it does play a role in the lack of success for some of these projects. They are trying to create and tell an in-depth / complex story, and they have little time to stretch anything out and explain things to where I would understand it and appreciate it when these things pay off later on in the series. But honestly, I think it's still inexcusable to have this bad of writing. One of the biggest issues I had with the timing or lack of it with this show comes from the fact that they literally dedicated 2 whole episodes to flashbacks of events that took place on Brendock when the twins were young. Now, I'm a fan of flashbacks and I was glad to see some of them, but 2 whole episodes in a series that only lasts 8 episodes total? The flashbacks were timed nicely in episode 3, but for the penultimate episode to be an entire flashback sequence again is just crazy. Like, everybody was stressed out and not really pumped up for the finale because nobody knew how they were going to finish all of this with 1 episode left. And then there's still plenty of questions unanswered from those episodes. We don't know who exactly the witches are, what are their powers, we are lacking information on what the threat is, and more about divergence, which is originally why the Jedi went to the planet. And I want to go back to the dialogue too, and some of the character decisions for a moment. One of the reasons why I felt like the writing was so elementary is because in the episode 3 flashback, Osha and May are arguing with each other about Osha becoming a Jedi and whether or not she should stay home with the family, the witches. I know they are just children, but the whole like, I want to go because the Jedi are good, no you can't go because the Jedi are bad, it's just banter that lacks depth. The witches despise the Jedi, and we have no idea why. Sol can't explain why he doesn't trust the witches, and he can't come up with a valid reason as to why he wants to become a father figure for Osha, literally right out of left field. The dialogue left me wanting more, and I know I should. Now let me shift my focus to Kamir. I liked him. I even liked his mask. I know people are making fun of it, calling him Smilo Ren, but I thought it was cool. His character was compelling at times, especially when he tells Sol about why he kills Jedi. He wants to live his life his way and use his powers his way without being told what to do by the Jedi. I was expecting more compelling dialogue when Kamir is trying to convince Osha to train with the dark side in the later episodes. But as usual, nothing really sticks with this show. Other questionable things that stand out to me include the sudden changes between May and Osha. I understand why they swap roles in the series, I get what they were trying to do, but I don't think the way they wrote it makes much sense. For instance, 1 minute May is working with Kamir, who she didn't know was, the Dark Lord Master or whatever. They're looking for Kalnaka, and then all of a sudden she decides to betray him and switch sides basically. Then with Osha, the entire time she's rejecting Kamir's offer for dark side training later in the season, and then all of a sudden she just loses control and she kills Sol, she bleeds a lightsaber crystal. Like, this stuff doesn't make sense, and it doesn't feel like it pays off even if some of it is cool. And speaking of cool things, let me talk about a few things I did like. Like I said, I enjoyed Kamir as the villain. His appearance, demeanor, and fighting style was cool. His battle with the Jedi in the forest was awesome. The way he fought using the force pull to pull 2 Jedi together and impale both of them at the same time with his lightsaber was an awesome move. And then when he basically cheated and used his other little saber to stab Jeki multiple times and stabbed her to death, it was just nice to see the bad guys win ultimately in this show. Like, slaying Jedi kind of reminded me of Vader, slaughtering the rebels in Rogue One. And even the fight scenes with the hand-to-hand combat and dips and dodges were pretty cool. I thought that choreography was nice, and it's like an added addition to where it's not just Jedi swinging lightsabers around the whole time. And then some of the slow-mo that was incorporated for that Matrix-like effect, especially when Sol and Kamir were fighting in the finale, I thought it was a nice touch. I'm not sure why people hated the combat so much, and that's why my concerns mostly lie within the writing of this show. I also think that it is freaking amazing to see Plagueis in live action, and I know this isn't the show that I want to see him associated with like many of you think, but you can't deny how cool and scary it was to see him just creeping around the corner in that cave. And it's a shame that this series was plagued with so many issues, because the finale was kind of cool. I thought that was one of the stronger episodes in the series. Plagueis is a big reason for that, but it was, again, one of the stronger episodes and had a lot of the cool things, and the way it seemingly set up season 2 was kind of good. But I have a hard time sitting here saying that I want to see a season 2 when it's just like the Book of Boba and Kenobi, where I'd love for more seasons, continue the story, but I don't really want to after the way they botched things up. And the hardest pill for old school fans like me to swallow is the continued twisting of the canon with this new Star Wars content. You gotta remember, like 10 years ago, Disney changed canon, and still some of it doesn't make sense to me. The expanded universe was reclassified as Legends, and then Disney's new canon is now their version of the expanded universe. It doesn't all make sense to me. And they keep claiming that they're taking inspiration from Legends and incorporating that stuff into new projects like The Acolyte and the upcoming Rey movie, but they're also changing things significantly. For example, the witches using the thread to force create the twins is not accurate to the original lore. Plagueis and Palpatine tried to create a being with the Force, and they failed. And in response, the Force itself created its own being, which was Anakin, and placed Anakin Skywalker in his mother Shmi. So, what is Plagueis doing in this show? Was he watching and learning from the witches? Are we altering the lore again for no reason? Like, the witches have to be created to be the first ones to do this? Like, I know Plagueis needs a reason to do this, but like, why can't we just get that injected into a story, somehow in a show or a movie and see Plagueis do it? Like, why? I don't understand why we're switching around things like that. Like, to me, that just seems to be a waste of time, energy, and resources. And many fans are upset and going the woke route again because of the fact that there are two mothers creating their twins. And I'm not one to complain about Disney being progressive, as I am a supporter of more diversity and representation in Star Wars and in other areas of media, because whether you like it or not, we all have to realize that this is a big world we live in, and there's a lot of different people with diverse beliefs, preferences, traditions, religions, sexual preferences and whatnot. However, I've kind of had enough with Disney's ongoing campaign to promote stuff that should not be the focus of Star Wars, and I'm also tired of them being so worried about the fan base, even the idiots that are out there. And this perceived agenda pushing also adds to the disappointment. Star Wars has always been about the epic battle between good and evil, just like any other sci-fi franchise out there. But with this show, all I kept hearing, reading, and seeing is one stupid question being asked. Is this the gayest Star Wars ever? What? Why are we having this discussion? Is this show about relationships and sex? No. So why is this being asked by interviewers, and why is Leslie and the actors always talking about it? Why are we still talking about making white men uncomfortable? Why can't they focus on making a really strong show or movie with people that represent diverse backgrounds? Make something good with this representation, and it can be celebrated forever, and those people of these diverse backgrounds can be celebrated and praised as well. I've been watching season 2 of House of the Dragon since it's coinciding with The Acolyte, and that show features gay characters and actors and actresses, yet nobody calls it woke because of how good it is. Same with Game of Thrones. It was the same thing. Like with these shows, there's no room for the homophobes to come in and cry about things because these shows are so damn good. The writing is good. The action is good. The dialogue is good. Have I mentioned the word good enough for House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones? And I want to bring up one example here. Emma Darcy. She plays Queen Rhaenyra in, and yes, I'm saying Queen, in House of the Dragon. She identifies as non-binary in real life. And what's talked about more? The way she identifies herself, or how good of a job she is doing in the show? The answer is the latter. So see, it is possible for a show to be successful even with a diverse cast with progressive beliefs. Even look at another most recent example is the Fallout show. People were thinking it was going to be woke trash because, in the trailer, two of the main characters, one of them's a girl and one of them's black. And that show had some of the best character development I have seen in a show or a movie in quite some time. That show took you on a journey, and everything paid off by the time you got to the season 1 finale. And I look forward to more seasons of Fallout. As a longtime Star Wars fan, I want to see more added to the lore. I want to feel like a nerd again watching this stuff. I want to simply sit down after work, turn on the TV, and relax while watching something fun. I don't need sexual tension forced into a Star Wars product. I don't need to see awkward scenes of half-naked men being watched by other characters. All I want is a 45-minute break from all the stresses of the real world. I don't want to watch an agenda-pushing campaign. As simple as that. And I've really tried to be patient and accepting of some of this stuff, but I finally hit burnout with it. I'm so over this agenda-pushing crusade that Kathleen Kennedy and her minions are leading. The Acolyte originally showed promise when they claimed the show would delve into the Sith and the dark side. Unfortunately, the show fell drastically short of its potential and expectations set by initial announcements and trailers. The show featured some intriguing concepts and ideas, but they were poorly executed. The plot was riddled with nonsensical moments and sudden character decisions that felt rushed or just didn't make any sense. The show had a budget of a whopping $180 million, and this is what we got? And what did they spend money on? The show took place in a few unremarkable locations like a big forest, a small town, and inside a few ships and a couple of rooms in the Jedi Temple. This show had every opportunity to expand the lore with many different things like the witches, Jedi, and dark side things, especially with Khmer. Instead of doing a deep dive on the Force and the dark side in particular, the show diverted its focus to a subplot about the Jedi recruiting twins from their mothers, which was a storyline poorly written and unengaging. Disney's track record with Star Wars continues to be hit or miss, and it mostly misses. The Acolyte is a glaring miss. We could have gotten a show that enriched the lore of Jedi, Sith, and the overall High Republic time period. Instead, we got a poorly written story that lacked depth and logic. Well, those are my thoughts on The Acolyte. I really wish it was better, but here we are. There's nothing we could do about it. Give me your thoughts on the show down below. I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks. Check out the rest of the channel and consider subscribing if you are new here. And again, thanks for watching and take care.